everyone, welcome. Thanks for listening in today to Launch Your Life. I want to start out tonight with a question. Just a show of hands, how many of you had a dream job or career? Pretty much everyone. I know you can think of when you were a kid, you always heard your friends saying, they dreamed of going to the moon, of being an astronaut, of being a doctor. And here today, we're going to tell you why that's possible. We know that every person can define their success and they can earn it. Every person deserves the right to pursue opportunities without facing obstacles, without facing barriers, penalties, whether that's government regulation or just internal barriers, for example, education. So we know at Americans for Prosperity Foundation and Bridge to Wellbeing that freedom is the single greatest way to achieve more prosperity and for people to experience the greatest amount of well-being. It's been shown through history and research. And so today we want to give you some of the tools you may need to take that first step towards your dream, whether that's acing an interview or perfecting your resume, or simply just learning how to put your best foot forward to network, to make an impression on your boss, and to be on your way to living out your version of the American dream. So sit back and we're going to welcome our speaker, Tyler Cotterell, and enjoy the class.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Gloria, for inviting me today. And I'm very excited to share what I have to offer with you. Just talking about getting a resume done and being able to go through an interview process. I know that can be very difficult for many of us. And in this job market that we have today, that can be something to where a lot of people need help with that. And I know it can be your opportunity to shine, and it can also be a thing that can be a challenge for many of us. So hopefully after my talk today, you'll be able to get some good headway with that and be able to create a resume that works for you. So the big question I always get, why do we create a resume? Why is that important? And many people, they always seem to answer this question wrong. They always say you create a resume to get a job. And that's actually not true. You create a resume to get an interview. Hopefully, after you go through the interview and do well, and maybe this will equip you with some of those tools, then you get the job. So I want you to be thinking through the whole time I'm talking today. I want you to be able to think, I'm creating a resume not to get a job, but to get an interview. I need to sell this company, this position, this job on myself and the things I've got, but with the end goal in mind to get the interview. So here's the thing, these are compiled with a lot of the questions that I get and people ask me constantly when I'm meeting with them, and they say, well, that's great, I want to put together a resume, how do I do that? What should I do, where do I start? And some of those different things, just to be able to say, what should I have included on there? So some of the basic resume tips I usually run people through on is I say, you want to be able to fit your resume to one page. And we're also going to provide an example resume that you can see, something that has some of my experience on there and whatnot that would be a good example for you. So you want it to fit on one page. The reason for that is this. Most employers, when they're looking through this stack of resumes, anymore it's all online. So you click to apply, you submit your resume, you send it in. I want you to think about it like this. They have 10,000 people apply for this one position, right? All of those resumes come into the computer system, and it has to use some kind of filter software to go through and then decide keep or not keep. Then the next thing is, once it reaches that pile, this golden pile of resumes, the employer is going to take that and they're going to look through them and then decide, is this somebody that we want to sit down with and interview? And then eventually all those people that we interview, we're going to pick out one to finally hire. So you really want to think about that. And most people, they give me this resume and it's like 5 pages long. Cut it back. You want to have it on 1 page or less if you can. You can add a cover letter if it's needed, but it's not necessary in most circumstances. The only thing is you want to really have your relevant information on there and your experience tailoring it to the specific job. So if you're applying to be a delivery driver, it's not necessarily relevant information to put your sales experience. So you want to make sure you're tailoring it to the job you're applying for. Less information is always better. In the world we live in, lots of white noise, too much information. People don't even watch a 10-minute YouTube video. So you got to know that the average employer spends 30 to 90 seconds looking at your resume. Not even 5 minutes, 30 to 90 seconds, that's all you have. So you got to get it short, sweet, right to the point. Another one I get asked about is your GPA. And so people are saying, do I put that on there? Do I leave it off? Don't worry about it unless it's relevant. The other thing would be this. You want to always use action verbs in the past tense. Things that you have done, accomplished, strive to achieve, whatever, all in the past tense, action verbs. And again, talking about that 30 to 90 seconds per resume. So I'm just going to go over a quick example one that you have in front of you. So you can see that very top line, it has posted and exceeded full-time quotas while only working 24 hours per week. So an employer can look at this and they can say, wow, here's somebody that hit their quotas, they went above and beyond because they exceeded them, and they did all of that working part-time. They weren't even a full-time employee. So it gives a very relevant experience, and then you'll see off to the left margin they have sales and marketing skills. This type of resume is called a skills-based resume. So a lot of people just have employer, time they worked there, where they worked at, and they kind of list them all out. It's much better to have a resume that's like this with the skills based. So you can just quickly look and I can say, well, what does this person have with communication skills? And you look down at the bottom, it says proficient at Word, Outlook, Excel, and PowerPoint. And I can know right off the bat, okay, they know how to use all these different softwares. Another one would be CRM. That's a customer resource management. So when you're going into a sales position, that's something where the employer can look and be like, do they know how to use Salesforce? Do they know how to use fill in the blank CRM software? Yes, they do. So very important. Another thing that I get from people that I look to hire and also in the employment space that I hear from my friends and colleagues is this. So many people don't check their resume for errors and issues and misspellings. You'd be shocked that you get an email that this person is mark.harper@gmail and there's an extra R. You know, forgot the period, something. And that employer's like, wow, this is a great candidate. We want to hire him. Let's get him in for an interview, right? And they send an email and it gets returned to sender. Nothing is more unprofessional than that, and it happens all the time. So read it frontwards, backwards, print it out, give them to your friends, let them look at it to prepare you for the big one, which is getting ready for your interview. So most important thing, why do you interview? To get a job or ultimately to get a second interview. So there might be several hiring rounds that you have to go through, and sometimes in this day and age you're going to have like a filter interview, a phone screening interview, a face-to-face, and then they'll finally make a hiring decision. So you want to know that sometimes your only purpose of the interview is to get a second one. So let's talk about this. When you're going into this, I want you to always be thinking of the next step. So asking questions either out loud or in your head, where do we go from here? So every answer, every response, every question they give you, your response has to be, where do we go from here? What are the next steps? An important thing about that is you want to know, is there more than one interview? Very fair question to ask. You need to know, am I one applicant or is there hundreds of applicants? So in my personal story, I had a financial company that I wanted to work for really bad, considered it my dream job. And I looked it up and I actually was able to get in touch with a hiring manager, and they told me, they said, we have 10,000 applicants that we're gonna get this year. We're gonna pick 38. We're gonna have multiple interviews. I think I had upwards of 22 interviews before they finally made a hiring decision. So I had all of that. Some were on the phone, some were face-to-face, some they had to fly me to their headquarters out in Nashville, Tennessee, and all these steps and processes I had to go through before I finally got the job. So very fair question, where do we go from here? Another one is this, it's very popular. Do you have tests or homework that is required? I had to do ethics tests, FBI background checks, financial compliance tests, all these countless things, a DISC profile, a strengths finder. I've had to do several of those in the interviews I've had and stories I've heard. The other thing is sometimes they'll bring a bunch of people together and you're gonna do some kind of a team building exercise. So you gotta get ready for that in the interview. And then the most important thing is, are there other candidates? What are you fighting against? Is it you and 2 other people? Is it you and 300, or in my case, 10,000 applicants? They only picked 38, and luckily going through all those interviews, I finally got the job. Very exciting. So your job during the interview is this. We've already covered this. Where do we go from here? And then this is the other one I have, is that setting follow-up is probably the second most important thing. So we've done the resume. They picked us out. They're like, man, this is a great person. Let's get them in here for an interview. You sit them down. Okay, we're going to start asking you all of these questions. And you always got to be thinking in your head, What is the next step? So one thing I encourage people to do, it's kind of like a sales 101 is this. Imagine when you go in to buy a cell phone, okay? And you meet with this wonderful lady and she's talking to you about the cell phone. You're very interested. Like, I think I want to buy this phone. But many a times the sales rep will leave you with this cliffhanger of saying, man, you're so interested in buying this phone. Just let me know if you're interested. Just give me a call. If you want to buy it, you call me. And that's actually very poor sales skills. What she should do is say, hey, if you're interested in buying this phone, can I give you a call next Thursday? Because you're saying you want about a week to think about it and it's Thursday. Can I call you next Thursday and see if you're ready to jump in and get this new fill in the blank phone? That sales rep, then all of a sudden when they call you next Thursday, you're expecting their phone call. And you answer and she says, hey, this is Nancy from fill in the blank cell phone company. And I know that you were looking at the such and such model phone. Are you ready to go? Do you want to buy it? Any other questions I can answer for you, whatever. The likelihood of her getting that sale is very, very high. Let me give you the flip side. She doesn't do that. You don't tell her a good time to follow up. And next week comes and she calls you on Thursday and you're not expecting her phone call. And then you tell her, oh, I don't know, I haven't really decided. And then the following week comes and she calls you the Thursday after that, or the Friday after that, and the Tuesday after that. And it eventually just gets really irritating, and the likelihood of you buying that product goes way, way down. An interview is the exact same. They sat down with you, they met with you, so you need to schedule follow-up to say, I went through this interview, I'm feeling really good, interview's over, and you ask them, where do we go from here? Would it be okay if I called you next Tuesday to follow up? If they say yes, they are giving you permission to call them to find out if you made it further in the interview process or got the job. And they'll be expecting your phone call. And you always want to act as if this is your only chance to get a visit with the company. I always tell people they only have one Super Bowl, and this is your Super Bowl, right? You only have one opportunity. You only have one in the Madison Square Gardens boxing match. This is your boxing match, okay? Only one person is going to leave this ring victorious. Only one team is going to walk off that field as the winner, and we want it to be you. So the difference is you've got to go into it with that opportunity mindset, thinking this is the only chance I have, and you want to do these two things. You want to be very prepared and know about the company. Too many people, they fail to do research about the company, understand. I've personally been on interviews, or I've heard the horror stories of people that show up, they sit down and they talk to them and they ask them and they say, man, this is really going well with the questions we've asked you. Do you have any questions about our company? And the person on the other end kind of just stares at them blankly, and they know nothing. They don't know about the company, or I've heard stories where they go into interview and they were actually sitting in on the interview for the wrong position. And they're like, oh, I thought this was a sales position. And they're like, no, this is for a marketing position. You know, sales is marketing, but we're talking like marketing, graphic design, etc. And they totally lose the opportunity of the job because they don't look like they did their homework, because they didn't. So very important to do that. So a big thing is this, first impression. My grandpa always said you can never make a second first impression. You can never make a second first impression. When you walk in, when they see your smiling face, you stick out your hand to meet them, you can never do that twice. If you mess it up, if you stumble, if you don't look them in the eye, they're going to be thinking about that throughout the entire interview. Okay? Most people are formulating what they think of you within the first few minutes of the first time they met. Okay? Very important thing to do this, dress to impress. I'm dressed today business casual. This whole getup is less than $70, including the shoes and the belt. Very easy to do. And you just want to have it to where you don't want to underdress ever, but you also don't want to overdress. And sometimes I tell people there's no such thing as overdressing, but you just want to be careful because you don't want to go into kind of a relaxed atmosphere. Everybody in the office is wearing blue jeans and maybe a tucked in polo shirt or something. You come in dressed in a suit and tie, it might actually work towards your detriment. But I always say this, you can never go wrong with business casual. So gentlemen that are watching just how I'm dressed today, you can do that. The other thing is for the ladies in the audience, you always want to make sure that you're not wearing anything distracting or something that you might get caught on, like if you have accessories, you're wearing a bracelet, anything like that, and it catches on your shirt, your blouse, etc., you want to watch out for that. And we'll talk about that again later. I always say this, you want to greet everyone as though they were the CEO. So I have a fun story. When I was out in my world of sales experience, I was selling a copier. And I walked into this office, and there was this wonderful older gal sitting up front, and we'll call her Sally. And I introduced myself, and I'm like, hey, Sally, I'm Tyler Cotterell, nice to meet you. And she's like, oh, are you here to meet with someone? I said, yeah, I'm meeting with Harold today. Actually, we're gonna sit down and talk about maybe getting a new copier. Oh, that's wonderful. And for the rest of the time, all we did is just kind of this friendly banter back and forth. Where are you from? Do all this stuff. And I guess Harold was like really busy. And he comes out later when the appointment, I think we were actually borderline being late for the appointment, but I was just sitting there talking to her. And he comes out and he goes, oh, hey, you must be Tyler. I'm glad you met my wife. And right from that moment, I knew that the likelihood of me getting that sale was way higher because I treated her as an equal. And she wasn't necessarily the CEO, but she was the CEO's wife. So very important from the minute you walk in that office, how you treat people. I also have had interviews where they told me that my interactions throughout the company were all being monitored. And then when I sat in on the interview, they had notes about what people thought about me. I actually had an interview one time where it was a phone call I had made to schedule the interview, and they had asked that person, just the person that picked up the phone and scheduled the interview, how was his tone? How was his demeanor? Did he sound cool, calm, and collected? Did he sound like somebody that you would want to talk to on the phone? And they had all of those notes as far as what that person's perception was of me. So very, very important. Treat everyone as the CEO. And then we do live in a place, in a country where shaking hands firmly with a smile while making eye contact is very important. So you want to learn how to do that, and nothing wrong with practicing that as well. So we talked about this a little bit with the dress code, making sure that you're wearing business casual. Another thing is to check for wrinkles and tears, anything like that, proper tie placement. I always tell people this. Again, you can't go wrong with business casual, but you want to be careful, okay? Many times when people wear a tie, I'll give you a great example. One thing is, or with some dress clothes, it can be too flashy. The other thing is, many people love to cheer for their favorite team. So going back to the football reference, let's say you love the Patriots, okay? And you go into the office and you're wearing your Patriots tie, right? What if your hiring manager hates the Patriots to the core of their being, and you're rocking the Patriots tie? All of a sudden, your likelihood of getting that job has gone down slightly because all of a sudden you're starting on a bad foot with that employer. I always tell people this, get the job first. If you want to wear the funny tie, the sports tie, something like that, go ahead after you get the job. But in the interview, you want to try and stay as neutral as possible, always trying to make friends with people, even something as simple as dress code. We talked about this. You don't want to underdress or wear anything appropriate. And I always tell people, I've heard these stories of people going into an interview, no kidding, wearing shorts and flip-flops. And they're sitting there at the interview, and it's like a financial institution or working at a bank, and they just thought that was no big deal because it was a Friday afternoon interview. And they showed up, and they're thinking their shorts and a polo getting ready to play golf or something like that, that it's going to help them, and it was actually to their detriment. So you want to be really careful with that. So smile and greet everyone as a CEO. Why do we do that? Well, there's a rule in psychology. It's called the 7% rule. A lot of people don't know this. 7% of everything you say is actually spoken, is verbal. 93%, that's almost all of everything we say in communication, isn't spoken at all. Has to do with how you're holding your hands, your body language, the tone of your voice, the inflections, different things with that. And then the other person you're talking to, their brain is picking that up. So the 7% rule. So you want to be very careful about how you hold your hands. Like as I'm talking today, you'll notice that a lot of times I put my hands out like this and it's open. That's because open, and I hold my hands right here in front of me. This is the trust plane. So that's why when we talk and we speak and I'm moving my hands like this, you feel that I'm kind of a trustworthy guy, and maybe I know what I'm talking about, maybe not. But if all of a sudden I started talking like this and making different gestures with my hands down, waving my hands in the air, all of a sudden, even though I'm saying the same thing, keeping my voice the same, your perception is changing because body language is that impactful. Another one that people say is they go, I really, really struggle when I go into this, let's say, a group interview, and there's 2 or 3 or 4 people, and I shake all of their hands, Tyler, and I talk to them, I met them, hey, nice to meet you, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. And I can't remember their name. Or I can remember one of them, but I can't remember all 4. And they say, how do you do that? How do you remember everyone's name? I'll tell you a little secret. Been in sales pretty much my entire life. I'm horrible at remembering names. Worse than that, I'll meet someone and cannot connect their face with their name later on. Okay, here's a great trick. You go into a group interview and there's 4 people. You shake their hands, you meet every single one. Try and remember the first person's name or the last person's name. So let's say I go down this row of people and the last one is Mike. That's his name, Mike. And I meet him, I go through the whole interview, and I get to the end and I go like this. Thank you so much for interviewing me today. It's been a pleasure. Mike, it was very nice to meet you. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. When would be a good time for me to follow up? Do you think I could give you a call next Friday, say 2 o'clock? Everyone in that room thinks I remembered their name because I made that quick comment to say it was wonderful meeting you, Mike. Everyone else in that line of the 4 people thinks I remembered their name, when really I totally forgot. So little sales trick there that can help you, especially if you're struggling. The other thing is you're already gonna be nervous. I mean, when I'm speaking today, I'm a little nervous. It's okay, that's normal. But you just step back, you take a deep breath, and then the most important thing is don't worry about remembering everyone's name. That'll make you more nervous. Just pick one, reference it sometime in the interview or at the end, and they'll all feel like you remembered their name. The last one is this, and this one, I can't emphasize it enough, just shocking to me. Another personal story, we had an opportunity to hire somebody, and it was for a delivery position. So most people would consider that entry level, pretty easy, but during the time when we were doing the hiring was in 2008. So it was right during the recession, and jobs were in a very high demand because a lot of people had lost their jobs. And we had this opportunity to hire somebody, and we had a different list of skills. We said, okay, not only you need to drive a truck, you have to have a good driving record, you have to be good with people, maybe have a little bit of sales experience, because there's countless times a delivery driver does some kind of an upsell when they're in the client's office, whatever. And we put this job posting out there, and I want to say we had 300 to 400 people apply for an entry-level delivery position. Okay, so let's say it was 400 people applied. Out of that, we filtered out the interviews. We actually didn't have software, so they were all printed resumes. We're going through trash and treasure, right? Deciding which one to keep, which one to trash. And we had compiled a list of 10% of those, let's say 40 people, that we wanted to actually interview. Sat down with every single one, asked them the same questions, had all the responses, great, nice to meet you. Some of them immediately were not hiring that person, but there was a lot of them. I would say the majority were like, man, that gal was wonderful, or that guy was a great guy. He would make a wonderful delivery person. And so we do all that, right? How many of them do you think wrote in a handwritten thank you note and said, thank you so much for interviewing me. I appreciate it. Thank you even just for the opportunity to apply at your company. Out of 40 people, do you know how many written thank you notes we got? 0. Not a single person wrote in to say, thank you for this opportunity to interview today. So I'm here to tell you, if one of them would have written a thank you note, what would the likelihood of that person bumping to the top of the stack, right? Going that extra mile. 40 people, not a single one. So you're gonna be different. You're gonna send a handwritten thank you note afterwards. Again, you forgot all their names, but you remember Mike, right? Address it to Mike. If you don't know, address it to the company. Hiring team, hiring manager. In this day and age, just Google it. Look up the company who is the hiring manager. If you can't remember if it was that guy or gal, call the company and talk to the administrative assistant and say, I had an interview last night and I think it was Tammy. Was it Tammy Marks? Was that the one I needed to talk to? Oh yeah, it was. Address it to Tammy Marks, right? Send it, put it in the mail. Okay, we're going to talk about this briefly again. It's that shaking hands firmly once we get into the interview room. Remember, 93% of what you say is not actually said out loud. You want to make eye contact. And then another important thing is this. You want to introduce yourself by your first and last name clearly. Hi there, I'm Tyler Cotterell. Nice to meet you. Hi there, I'm Tyler Cotterell. Nice to meet you. Another little tidbit of wisdom my grandpa gave to me. He said this. He said, I gave you a last name, so be sure to use it. Because if you don't, you're just another Joe. And what he meant by that was this. We all have a last name, and so few of us tend to use it. And if you were to meet somebody, and you're like, I just met this incredible person. They were actually, you know what? They were a celebrity. I met a celebrity the other night, and they were great. And your friend goes, well, who was it? And he goes, it was Will something. I can't remember, but his name was Will, and he's really famous. And I think he was in a movie or something, right? You have a last name. If it was Will Smith that you met, when we reference celebrities, we use their whole name, not just their first. So just like you're the celebrity in this instance. You're the one doing the interview. Make sure that your potential employer knows your last name. So if they interview 3 people that have the same first name as you, they remember you because you use your first and your last name. So moving right along, we have this thing right here, which is a tip about finding jobs in your area. So very important. If you're looking for a job in your area, where should you start? So I always tell people this is the technology part of our time, right? So I have some things listed here, like you've probably heard of them, Indeed.com, Monster.com, Career Builder, Craigslist, ZipRecruiter. These are all specific sites that have the ability to post and upload a resume, and that many a times are going to have the job postings in your area, from the entry level all the way up to hiring CEOs. That's where they find these jobs. Also want to bear in mind, you really want to work on your resume because of the fact that it's going to filter through any of these sites. So if you go to apply at ZipRecruiter, they have some kind of back-end software that's going to be filtering out your resume before you even get to the interview room. Another one is this, LinkedIn. And just the idea to start networking, really work on cleaning up your social media. This is like a given between LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Employers are going through, and they have the right to do so, going through these different social media outlets to see what kind of a person you are. Meaning, do you like to party 4 nights a week? Probably not going to hire you. Do you put stuff online that's inappropriate, using a lot of foul language, things like that? You might not be a fit with their company. So different things that show that many times pop up in our social media, or work really hard to clean that up. The other thing is this, many jobs are hired from within or hired by people that you know. Or maybe you know someone, you know Tom, who works at, I think, this bank, and Tom knows someone else that is hiring for a position. So it's very important to start networking, and there's no space where you can't network. Anything from your local coffee spot to maybe if you go to a church, if you're part of a club, etc. You can meet people there and start to network, and be sure to add them on LinkedIn. Another thing I always tell people is you're going to go through this process. Don't feel defeated if you click and apply at this position. Oh, I really want to work at fill in the blank bank, something like that. Or I really want to work at this giant cereal company or whatever it is, and you click to apply, and then you never hear back. And you call them, they're like, oh, the position already got filled. One thing I learned when I was working actually at a bank was this. Many times let's say I was working as a teller, doing a good job, meeting people, they really like me, all the stuff, and a position comes up that would be a move up in position, like a VP of banking or a personal banker. They hire from within first, then they go to the outside world. By law, they have to post the job for anybody to apply. Many times when they've already selected the candidate they want. And sometimes that candidate gets bumped because they post it, and that could be you applying, and they're like, this person's way more qualified even though they're not from inside our organization. But don't feel defeated if your dream job, the position you want, is already filled, because that's how companies operate. Another thing is this. People hire individuals that they like to be around, people they enjoy and get along with. They're asking you more and more of these questions to find out, do I like this person? Will they fit with our culture? Are they somebody that I would want to sit down with and have lunch and have dinner and talk my biggest fears and my biggest dreams in life and for this company? And if the answer to those questions is yes, you're in. Many a times more than, I wonder if they have enough experience. I always tell people, look at it this way. I would bargain to say that every single person that gets an application in to Harvard University has a 4.0 GPA. So if a 4.0 GPA is a requirement to get into Harvard, everybody already has it. So how are you different than everyone else? That's why they interview or try to get people when they go to apply. They don't care about that. Everyone has a 4.0. But do I like you? Are you a fit? Will you be an addition to our organization, our community, our job, and our corporate culture? So we have that. Another thing is this, advancing in your career. I always use this little tagline. I say many times people that don't get paid for work now often get paid to do it later. What that means is this. So many people, whether it's positions I've been in, let's say I was a hiring manager, and people would come to me and they'd say, man, I've been working so hard, I really think I need a raise. I really think I need a promotion. I'm like, oh, that's great. Why do you feel you deserve a raise? And they always say, or almost always say this, they go, I show up on time, I work at 8 a.m., out of here at 5, and I really do my job well. And there was this one time when Mark was sick, and I actually picked up some of his work on Thursday for about 30 minutes. And I just feel I deserve a raise. And I really have to sit across the table and give them the sad news to say, everyone shows up on time. They all work 8 to 5. And the things you've just described to me were your job duties as to why we hired you. Now let me give you an example of somebody that gets a raise, gets a promotion. I work 8 to 5, I do all this stuff. I've been working an additional Saturday for half a day for free to cover Tom's workload because he's getting overwhelmed with work, and we're working on designing this new budget app that'll really help the company. Kind of just been doing it on the side for about 4 hours on Saturday. Many times those people, when they meet with me, they're not even asking for a raise. They're just telling this story, or they're just showing what they've done. They're doing work for free, or they're going above and beyond more than the 8 to 5, I just show up for work. Those are the ones that get promotions. So many times the people that don't get paid for work now get paid to do it later. You always want to walk a day in your manager's shoes. What that means is this. Would you give you a raise? If you were the hiring manager, how would you want to be approached, talked to? Things that were, to be brought up. A very poor argument to get a promotion is, I talked to Tom and he's making $2,000 a year more than me. I think I deserve a raise. Very poor logic. Another thing going into that is this. You never want to talk about pay with other coworkers, and here's why. Two people in a room, they work the same job, the same hours, same position, and we even hired them on the exact same day. And they're in the office coffee break room, and they're talking to each other, and they're like, hey, how much do you make? I'm just curious. So person A asks person B, how much do you make? There is 3 possible scenarios, all of which are bad, except for maybe the last one. First one is this. The person that asked the question makes way less than the guy he's talking to. He's gonna feel really crummy thinking, why do I make $5,000 a year less? And we have all the same requirements, hired on the same day, etc. Scenario number 2. You make $5,000 more than the person you asked the question to. Now they feel like really crummy themselves because they're thinking, man, I guess I shouldn't ask that question. I didn't realize that Tom makes $5,000 a year less than I do doing the same job, hired at the same time, etc. And option 3, which is kind of neutral, you both get paid the exact same. Okay? It's just never a good idea. The best person to talk to if you're worried about your pay is the person that can give you a raise. Why else does it matter to anyone else? It's none of their business. Maybe with the exception of your spouse, right? That would be the one person you could tell, not coworkers. Last thing would be this. We talked about it before. You want to become the person that you would want to promote, and then just remember, everybody shows up on time and everybody does their job well. How are you different? Why do I want to promote you? Why do I want to make you the VP of marketing when you've been in marketing for 5 years, just like all your peers? Why do we want to make you the VP? Sell me on it. Help me understand that so I can promote you. So moving into the tough stuff, interview questions. Here we go. These are some examples of questions that you'll get, and then really briefly talking about this so it'll help you. There's just the general interview that's very common, and usually one person, maybe an employer, HR person, is asking the questions. You might have the phone screening, which I mentioned earlier. That's like hello, this is such and such company calling, and they're going to start barraging you with questions. What they're trying to do is decide, is your resume going to be in the trash pile or the treasure pile, the keep pile, right? That's it. Another one might be a speed interview. Those are usually done at like a career fair, meaning they line up all these different employers on like a board or a panel. And they ask you several questions. You only usually have about 20 to 30 minutes. All of those employers have one person speak for them as like a representative. And then all of a sudden down the line, you're basically doing an interview with 7 companies at once. It's a speed interview. And then the last one would be the group interview. I've had countless interviews that are that way. One time it was kind of funny. I had an interview that I went into, and I was talking to one person on the phone, and he was asking me a question like we're going to talk about in a minute here. And he's asking me a question, I give him an answer. And he asks this, and I answer. And the whole thing went for about an hour. I get to the very end of it. He was like, so what do you guys think? Do you have any other questions for Tyler? And there were 4 other people that were actually on that phone call. Total of 5 people interviewing me. I was talking to one person for the entire hour, and it was like a surprise group interview. I had no idea. So go in prepared, pretend like everybody's in the CEO's in that room, even though they might not be, especially when it's on the phone, you don't know. So what kind of questions are they going to ask? Here we go. The question that I've heard just about in every single interview ever in the history of man, tell me about yourself. Anytime you use the words tell me, it is an open-ended question. Another sales tip. If you're asking a client, do you like this? Yes or no. Can I get you this? Yes or no response. Those are all closed-end questions. But if I say, tell me about your office needs, you cannot answer that with yes or no. So the employer is asking you, give me a quick snippet, tell me who you are, and you're more than okay telling them where you're from, what you enjoy doing, and then kind of weave in there why you would be a fit for the company. Talk about your passions, your strengths. I encourage people to get together a quick elevator pitch, which is something, tell me about yourself, answered in 1 to 3 minutes, and practice it. It's very important. You know that every interview they're gonna ask you this, so be ready. Another thing going into all of these questions is this. The more questions that they get to ask you, the higher likelihood of them hiring you. If you talk about yourself when they say, tell me about yourself, for 25 minutes, they only asked you one question. They might have a list of 50 and they're only now gonna have time to get through maybe 5. Okay, so let them keep asking. So 1 to 3 minutes, tell me about yourself. Second one is this. Why should we hire you? Sounds silly, right? Why should we hire you? What they're asking is this. Mr. Cotterell, we have 40 different applicants and we're only gonna pick one. Why are you that one? Back to the Harvard reference, right? Everybody has a 4.0. Why does our school want to take you on to be a part of this college? Same thing in that interview. Why is that? So they're trying, this is kind of a leader of the pack question, and they're looking for you to convey your passions and interests in their company, but specifically relating to your strengths, where you're fit. Third one would be this. What do you think is your greatest accomplishment? Any of these questions that are kind of, what are your biggest strengths? What are your biggest weaknesses? I always say prepare for, especially strengths, weaknesses, accomplishments. Prepare for like 3. One time I was in an interview, that was funny. They said, what is your greatest 5 weaknesses? I totally panicked because I had prepared for 3 and I had to come up with 2 on the spot. And they did that on purpose, trying to get me to squirm a little bit and figure out, oh, I bet you this kid prepared for 3. Let's hit him with 5. Same thing, greatest accomplishment. They're looking to see where you fit with the company, showcasing your strengths based on accomplishments you've had in your life. Another one to be ready for would be this. I've had them ask, what is your greatest accomplishment? I've also had companies ask, what is your greatest disappointment in life? What is the thing that you regret the most? Sometimes with that question, that can also be a filter to find out how you do in an uncomfortable setting. And also if you relay information that is untrue, unethical, or illegal. Because asking that can be very tricky. So prepare for those kind of curveballs as well. Another one is this. This was a unique question I was asked and I thought it'd be a funny one to put in there. They said, how many hours each week do you typically need to get your job done? It's an open-ended kind of question to where most people be like, well, I work 40 hours a week, so 40 hours a week. And the response they're looking for is, can you go above and beyond when the duty calls? Everybody works 40 hours a week is what they're assuming. But if you're like, I work 40 hours a week, but I'm more than okay picking up an extra night or weekend, I'm okay traveling, those are all going to be pluses, kind of the answers they're looking to flesh out. And this is another open-ended. You see how we're using that tell me. Tell me a story about, fill in the blank. Tell me a story about a time when a coworker had a disagreement with you. Tell me a story about when you saved the company a ton of money. Tell me a story about any of those, fill in the blank. And what they're looking for is this. They're trying to find how you respond to that question and how you're a fit with the culture, how you can measure those two up. So you want to really be careful when you're talking about it. And the biggest thing here is not to take too much time to tell the story. Have a few different things ready to go, little canned responses that you've practiced so that, again, they can keep just asking you questions. This is a really important one. When you get to the end of the interview, so I always say landing the plane. You get to the end of the interview, everything's done. Wow, this looks great, Tyler. Do you have any questions for us? Anything that we can answer for you? Anything you want to know about the company? Many times people are sitting in that interview totally panicked and they have nothing prepared. And they're like, nope. And they're like, okay, great. Well, we'll see you later. We might call you and you set your follow-up. We'll talk to you next week. But the candidates that ask questions about the company, yeah, actually I do. I was wondering, so I saw online that you guys are based out of France, but also the US. Will I ever travel to France for the job? Or I'm kind of wondering, it seems like a really large company. Do you guys have a team of like 100 people or 500 people? I wasn't sure. Any of those things are pushing you further into being hired because you're asking them about the company. You're complimenting that and you're showing not only am I a fit, I'm actually curious about it. I'm very interested in getting this job. So prepare at least 5 questions and then have your interest ready. So let's cover some common mistakes. So I'm gonna go through 5 common mistakes I would consider the most common while interviewing. Here we go. Number 1, we talked about this briefly, taking too long to answer a single question. You wanna keep it relevant, whatever you're answering with, but you also wanna keep it concise. Short and sweet. Remember, answer their question as best you can, calm demeanor to get to the next question. The more questions they ask, the more likely they are to hire you. And you can never lose with that. Second thing would be this, giving a bad answer or you're unable to sidestep the question. I always tell people, look at politics. If they get pinned down with a really tough, hot topic issue that they know nothing about, they are masters at sidestepping the question. I'm not saying don't answer it, but be able to provide kind of a half step over response. So I always tell people, don't panic. And by practicing, you'll have great responses. And honestly, if you don't know the answer, just tell them truthfully, I don't know. But the worst thing to do would be just to sit there with the wide eyes and have no response at all. It's okay to say, I really don't know, but I can get back to you on that. Third thing would be this, showing you're not a fit with the company. It sounds easy, but if they don't relate with you or if they don't enjoy talking to you, why would they hire you? If you're not a fit with the company, you're not a fit with the culture, and you're giving all these very poor responses and any of that, you're out. They want that interview to come to a close sooner than later. They might even bump it. It was supposed to be an hour, 20 minutes. Hey, nice meeting you. We'll be in touch. That means you are not hired. So you don't want to do that, and you want to try and show you're a fit with the company. Another thing is this. If they start talking, in my example, if they start talking about how badly they love fly fishing in Montana, that's where I'm from, and I can relate to that, and I go fly fishing myself, talk about it. The hiring manager's like, oh, I saw this movie, a river runs through it, and like Brad Pitt, who's in it, and man, such a good movie, and like, did that really happen? Was that really filmed in Montana? And if I know about it, which one time in an interview I got asked that, I talked about it, and we started talking about that for like 20 minutes. Most people would be panicking thinking, I'm not answering any interview questions. This is going so poorly. But I'll tell you, it's actually going the opposite. They've moved past the ballpark standard answer, tell me about yourself, and they're actually relating to you in conversation. That's a win. The likelihood of you getting the job, very, very high. So don't worry about answering questions like that. Number 4 would be this, not being prepared. That would be not just struggling with answers, but even simple things like you forgot your resume and you didn't email it to yourself and you don't have it on your Google Drive. Doesn't look very good, especially when you list it as one of your strengths. I am very well prepared. Not in that instance. So you always want to have that. And then here's one I got asked. They said, who is our competition? That was the interview question. Who is our competition? I had no clue. And I was like, I'm not sure, but I can find out. Also, you could sidestep it and say this. I don't know who your competition is, but I know in my current job, we actually have 3 competitors. Would you like to hear me talk about that? Or what are you trying to find out with that question? That's very fair to ask that in an interview. And then one time I asked that, and the interviewer said, I don't know what my question was either. Let's just go to the next one. And so he wasn't ready either. And so by me asking, like, what are you trying to learn with that question? He just skipped it. So it might happen to you too. And the last one would be this: too much follow-up. Remember, the most important thing, you set your follow-up. You did the interview, or at the start of it, if it was going good and it gets over, you ask your questions about the company and say, where do we go from here? And they go, well, we'll let you know. Not good enough. You say, okay, great. Would it be okay if I follow up with you next Thursday? Gave you a call or gave you an email? Very rare that they'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're setting follow-up. Don't do that. They'd be like, yeah, sure. And then remember to call them next Thursday. That could be another thing. If you tell a hiring manager, CEO, the VP that you're sitting down with, I will call you next Thursday at 10, more than likely they add that to their calendar. Here to tell you, if you don't call at 10 o'clock, you're out. So be sure to mark it on your phone, set 3 alarms, follow up. Don't do it too much. If you said one day and you don't get in touch with them, leave a message on Thursday, just leave them alone. Give them a few days. They might be very, very busy. Don't call on Friday and on Monday just to make sure they got your message. It's moving you further and further away from getting the job. And this would be the last thing, landing the plane. You want to make sure to always prepare for the unexpected. So in my story earlier, I talked about you prepared for 3 weaknesses, and they said, tell me your top 5 weaknesses. You only prepared for 3. Okay, a little bit of a curveball. One time I had them ask me this: when was a time that you did something against company policy? And they just sat there silently. When was a time that you did something against company policy? They were looking for 2 responses to that question. I feel like I answered it well. I ended up getting the job in that instance. Was this: have you ever done anything illegal, unethical, truly against company policy? That would be the response they want you to say so that they don't have to hire you. Number 2 would be this: when was a time you pushed the envelope, your boss asked you to live in this box of creativity, and you went above and beyond against company policy, against your job description, and did something great for the company? That's the response they want. And then kind of the neutral response of maybe you haven't, that's fine too. But they want the bad one and then the good one. One time I got asked, why is a manhole cover round? This is just one of those very bizarre questions that they don't really have an answer to it, or they might, or how many gas stations are in America? Yeah, I have no clue, but they want to see how you respond to that question. I heard one from, I want to say it was either Google or Microsoft, a big tech company. They asked people, they say, if we shrunk you down to the size of a jelly bean and you were stuck in a blender, how would you get out? And there's about 5 different responses to that question, and all of them would be fine, but they're just looking to see, how are you going to come up with an answer to this question, or how are you going to react when we ask you this? Sounds goofy, but anymore companies do a lot of that. And then this one was one of my favorites, kind of like the against company policy one. Another question they asked me is this. They said, and this was a financial company, right? So they're really looking at things with investments and my competency there, but they were also looking, is this person ethical, and do they demonstrate good leadership? And they said, your coworker, at the end of the day, goes to the office supply cabinet and they take some Post-it notes. Would you tell on them? Or what would you do? You see your coworker take them. My response was this. I said, I don't know if it's against company policy, so if it wasn't, I wouldn't say anything. But I also would probably make a point to ask them and then just say, oh, hey, are you taking those home with you? Or maybe find out a little bit more. And if it turns out they were doing something wrong, I'd say something. Like, if they're taking stuff home, that's stealing, and stealing is wrong. But the first response, they were trying to trap me. They go, yeah, in our company, we don't care. It's like, if you want to take Post-it notes home, maybe you're working from home. There is no company policy that says it's wrong. But they asked me, they just said, you saw your coworker take Post-it notes home, what would you do? So it's kind of a trap question, any ways that you can do with that. And do we have any questions? Anybody in the audience have specific questions that we can answer for you?